To commemorate this wonderful day, I have made a decision for my daughter. Ava, I will give you the perfect opportunity to prove that you are truly a kind-hearted sister. The land given to Owen's parents will be passed on to your younger sister, Harper. For a moment, I couldn't understand what he was saying. Today was my wedding reception, and with those words spoken by my father, Benjamin, during his speech, the gentle music and the clinking of glasses were swallowed by silence. The hall, once filled with the joyful hum of celebration, felt eerily quiet. It was as if time itself had frozen. My father's words slowly, yet unmistakably, seeped into my mind. The land. To Harper? Beside me, I heard Owen take a sharp breath. His hand, which had been warm just moments ago, had turned icy cold. Across the table, I saw Harper, dressed in a red dress, smiling triumphantly. She wasn't shocked at all. Her lips curled in a victorious grin. "It's not even a house yet, just land," Harper said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. The cruelty behind her feigned innocence made my blood run cold. She was watching my reaction as if it were some kind of amusing play. A quarter acre of green hillside on the outskirts of Los Angeles. A gift from Owen's parents, the Carters. But it wasn't just land. It was the place where Owen and I were supposed to write the first page of our new life together. A place where my long-held dream, one I had never told anyone, was finally going to come true. A sunny kitchen where I could grow herbs. A garden where friends could gather and laugh freely. And someday, a space where our own children could run and play under the open sky. Owen had worked tirelessly to make my dream of a peaceful, honest home, a home free from exploitation, come true. Together with his parents, he had spent months searching for that place that contained every small piece of my dream. Welcome to our family. This is your canvas for the future. That day, the Carters tied the registered deed with a beautiful ribbon and handed it to us with the warm smiles of parents welcoming a true daughter. And now, my father was giving that canvas to my sister without my consent. Just like when I was a child, and he took away the fountain pen my grandmother had given me, simply to soothe a crying Harper. Ava has always put family first, thinking of others before herself. I'm sure she'll gladly accept my decision today. Right, Ava? My father's words pricked sharply at my chest. No one here knew how the kindness and self-sacrifice he praised had been forced upon me in reality. The murmur of the crowd began to rise and fall like waves. Curiosity, pity, and contempt swirled through the room as my father continued. Ava already has a wonderful partner in Owen, and she has the Carters behind her, but Harper is still trying to make it on her own. As her sister, isn't it only natural to help her? Those words felt like a curse that had bound me for years, that I must endure, that I must yield, that I must sacrifice myself. In our family, those things were considered natural and even virtuous. The used car I bought with my very first paycheck eventually became Harper's when she insisted she needed it to go to the beach with friends. When I complained, my mother looked at me with a sorrowful face and said, "She's still naive about the world. You're the grown-up now. Be generous and forgive her." Everything I owned was treated as family property, and if Harper wanted it, it automatically became hers. That was the unspoken rule of our house. But what my father was trying to take from me now wasn't just mine. It was a sacred place entrusted to us by Owen and his parents, a space born from their faith in our shared future. I gently released Owen's hand and took a step forward. Straightening my back, I let the cold knot of anger I had buried deep inside finally surface in my voice. "Father," my voice was surprisingly calm. There was no tremor, no tears. "That land belongs to the two of us. Even as my father, you have no right to take what is ours, or to give it away to someone else." My father's brow twitched, perhaps to his ears, so used to hearing nothing but my obedient yes. My words sounded like a foreign language. "What are you talking about, Ava? You shouldn't speak so stiffly among family." "No, this is a serious matter," I replied firmly. "What you are trying to do right now, here in front of everyone, is to take away our property without our consent. That act, in the eyes of the law, is called theft." Theft. The sharp sound of that word sliced through the air of the room. My father's face still wore its calm expression, but I didn't miss the dangerous glint that flickered in his eyes. Holding the microphone, he spoke in a deliberately patient, condescending tone, as though lecturing a stubborn child. "Ava, you seem a bit agitated. I understand. It's your wedding. Emotions run high. But be careful with your words. You're accusing me of stealing your property? How absurd. This is simply a rational managerial decision to redistribute family assets in the most effective way. You still lack the perspective to see the bigger picture? He shrugged toward the guests with a performative sigh. Good grief, what a troublesome daughter, he muttered. A few of his business associates laughed quietly from their table, but I no longer flinched. Beneath his feigned composure, I could clearly sense his unease and panic. A managerial decision, you say? I repeated his words softly. Then tell me, do you truly claim that disposing of your daughter and son-in-law's property without consent poses no legal problem whatsoever? As a company executive, surely you, more than anyone, understand the importance of compliance? A thin line of sweat trickled down his forehead. The mask of the calm, reasonable father cracked before my eyes. The laughter in the hall vanished completely. He had no answer. The forced smile disappeared, and his face turned red with humiliation. Then, at last, his emotions burst through. You ungrateful child. Do you have any idea who made you what you are today? His furious voice echoed through the silent room. But this time, the authority it once carried was gone. Instead, I heard the panic of a man cornered by an unexpected challenge. Of course I'm grateful for being raised, for everything you've provided, but that gratitude does not give you the right to dispose of my property as you please. I spoke slowly, each word deliberate and certain. If you truly intend to give that land to Harper, then I will not hesitate to call the police right here and now. My father's face darkened to a shade of purple, burning with anger and shame. The police? Don't be ridiculous. This is a family matter. Sit down, Ava. Are you trying to ruin this wedding, to disgrace us all? His shouting filled the room, but inside I felt strangely calm. The truth was, I had anticipated this. Ever since the day Owen and I announced our engagement and the Carters gifted us that land, something about my father and Harper's behavior had felt off. He had started asking about the property with the persistence of a real estate agent, inquiring about the exact lot size, the amount of tax, and whether there were any future development plans for the area. Despite claiming, I'm only concerned for your well-being, his questions felt less like a father's worry and more like an investor evaluating a potential asset. Harper's attitude was even more blatant. Wow, that's amazing, sis, she said with an innocent smile, while at the same time searching for an aerial photo of the property on her phone. Then she said casually, if I were to build my house there, I'd definitely want a pool. It wasn't the playful joke of a child. In her eyes, I saw a twisted certainty, as if she already believed the land belonged to her. The final confirmation came during a weekend dinner. My mother mentioned offhandedly, as if in casual conversation, Harper's been thinking about living on her own soon. My father jumped in immediately, as though he had been waiting for the cue. That's right. Maybe she could build a small house on the corner of Ava and Owen's land. It would be nice for the sisters to live close and help each other out. The moment I heard that, I understood everything. In their minds, that land had already been calculated and allocated as an asset to be given to Harper. All their words of blessing, all their supposed concern for our future, were nothing but a shallow performance meant to disguise their scheme. From that day on, I began preparing quietly. I was no longer the same passive, compliant daughter who would simply let things be taken from her. I secretly recorded a conversation between my parents discussing how to persuade Ava. I also took screenshots of Harper's social media messages, boasting to her friends, saying, soon, that beautiful land outside LA will be mine. In my handbag now, there is a USB drive containing all of that evidence. That's why, even as my father shouted in anger, I didn't flinch. I'm serious, I replied, my voice steady and unshaken. I have all the evidence proving that you plan to take my land during this wedding, Father. If you continue to disgrace yourself any further, I won't hesitate to act. My words made him draw a sharp breath. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in his eyes. He finally realized that I wasn't reacting out of emotion, but standing here with solid proof and unshakable resolve. Sensing his unease, my mother, Scarlett, hurried toward me in a panic. Grabbing my arm, she whispered frantically, her voice trembling as if trying to justify everything to the guests around us. Ava, please stop this. What are you saying in a place like this? It's humiliating in front of all the guests. Please later. We'll talk later, all right? I knew all too well what her "we'll talk later" really meant. It was never a discussion between equals. It meant hours, sometimes days, of being told how selfish and ungrateful I was, until I finally gave in and said, "I'm sorry." It was a ritual I no longer intended to take part in. "Mother, I'm not the one ruining this day," I said clearly, gently freeing my arm from her grasp. The one who ruined it was Father, when he stood here and announced that he would steal his daughter's property in front of everyone. My words left her speechless, and Harper cried out in disbelief. "Steal? How can you say something so cruel? Father only thought of me. He knows how much I've been struggling." She wiped away her tears dramatically, making sure everyone could see. "My freelance client went bankrupt, and I haven't been paid for 3 months. I'm trying to find new work, but it's impossible in this economy. I'm still living with our parents, but I can't keep burdening them in that tiny house." She spoke breathlessly, her voice quivering just enough to sound pitiable. "And meanwhile, you're marrying a successful lawyer, living in a mansion, and even getting a huge piece of land. I have no home, no money, no job, nothing. And you're saying you don't even have the decency to show a little kindness to your own family?" Her desperate outburst began to sway part of the crowd, especially the distant relatives who knew nothing of the real story. That was how Harper always did it, turning lies into sympathy with perfect precision. But not this time. "Yes, it must be hard, Harper," I said coolly, watching her perform her well-rehearsed act with detached calm. "The unpaid salary you mentioned, wasn't that because you completely ignored your deadlines and had your contract terminated by the client?" I took a step closer to her and spoke clearly enough for every guest in the room to hear. "And someone who's supposedly struggling that much financially doesn't take a trip to Las Vegas with friends last month and post pictures of a brand new designer bag on social media, do they?" At my words, the tears vanished instantly from Harper's face, replaced by pure hatred. The sympathy that had begun to spread through the hall evaporated in an instant, replaced by confusion and suspicion. Whispers filled the room, the guests no longer even pretending to hide their curiosity. My father pointed a trembling finger at me. "Enough! You are no longer my daughter. Get out of here, right now." Once upon a time, those words might have shattered my world. But now, I felt nothing. No sadness, no fear, only a strange sense of liberation, as if a heavy burden I had carried for years had finally been lifted. Before I could say anything, a calm yet commanding voice rang out across the hall, carrying more weight than any other sound in the room. "Benjamin, may I have a word?" It was Owen's father, Miles Carter. He rose slowly from his seat and turned to face my family. His expression was composed, but in his eyes burned an unmistakable sharpness and dignity that silenced the entire room. Miles was a senior partner at one of the most prestigious law firms in the United States. "Miles, this is, well, a private matter within our family," my father stammered, fumbling for an excuse. But Miles raised a hand to stop him and spoke in a clear, steady voice that carried to every corner of the room. "Let's clarify a few facts first. My wife and I gifted that land to Ava and our son, Owen. It was given with the hope that it would become the foundation of the new life they are about to build together." He paused briefly, then continued, his tone calm but decisive, like a lawyer presenting evidence before a court. "And just to be perfectly clear, the title transfer for that land was officially completed at the county registrar's office the week after their engagement was announced. Legally, the property is jointly owned by Ava and Owen. No one else has the right to touch it, not even a finger." Miles then smiled, a flawless, composed gentleman's smile. And looking my father directly in the eye, he asked the final and perhaps most devastating question. "Tell me, Benjamin, what exactly were you planning to do with someone else's property?" In that moment, I saw the color drain completely from my father's face. The face that had been dark red with rage turned pale, almost paper white, in a matter of seconds. Beside him, Harper's face had also gone completely colorless. Her mouth hung slightly open, frozen in disbelief. They finally understood. Their entire scheme had been legally meaningless from the start. And in front of dozens of guests at this wedding reception, they had effectively declared, "We tried to steal our daughter and son-in-law's land." Miles's calm, logical words shattered the vague and self-serving shields my father had always wielded. Family bonds, parental authority, filial duty. All that remained before the audience was a man who had just confessed in public to attempted theft, and his accomplice daughter. The music was still stopped. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the hall. Someone's cough echoed sharply in the quiet. Their masks had been completely stripped away. My father and Harper stood motionless, as if struck by lightning. It was my mother who recovered first. In a trembling voice, she turned to Miles, desperately trying to explain. "Miles, this is all just a misunderstanding. My husband simply... He just chose his words poorly because he loves our daughters so much. Isn't that right, dear?" She looked at my father for help, but he couldn't respond. His eyes were unfocused, staring into nothingness. To him, being publicly confronted and condemned through the absolute authority of law must have been an unbearable humiliation. Harper, still ghostly pale, could only whisper, "No, that's not true. It can't be." Over and over again. In her world, what belonged to her sister naturally belonged to her as well. That unspoken rule was collapsing right before her eyes. Her face showed no remorse, no sorrow, only childish anger and confusion at the realization that things would no longer go her way. The guests' murmurs grew louder. Several people were openly taking out their phones, trying to record the scene. Unable to endure their stares, my father finally spoke, his voice hoarse and shaking. "Ava, you told Miles something, didn't you? You turned him against us." It was a pitiful attempt to shift the blame, but those words became the final trigger. There was no pity left in me, no sympathy, not even a trace. I walked slowly toward my father, looked him straight in the eye, and spoke with absolute clarity. "No, I did nothing. You, father, proved your own greed to everyone here, with your own words. That's all that happened." Then I turned to face Harper. "Harper, you've always been this way. Everything I worked for, everything I earned through effort, you took it with tears and lies as if it were nothing. But it ends today. Your tears hold no power anymore. It's time for you to learn to stand on your own feet and live your own life." "What are you—" she began to stammer, her voice faint and broken. But I cut her off, meeting her eyes with a look I had never given her before, one of unwavering resolve. "Remember this, if you, or our parents, ever again try to touch what belongs to Owen and me, or if you spread lies to the people around us to harm us, I will not hesitate to take legal action. And when that happens, what you lose will be far more than just a piece of land. Keep that in mind." My words were not a threat. They were a declaration, a vow that defined the rules of the new world I was about to live in. When I finished, Owen, who had been silently holding my hand the entire time, stepped forward. His expression was no longer that of a gentle groom. It was the composed, focused face of a skilled attorney standing before the court. With calm authority, he faced my family. The weight of his presence alone made my father, mother, and Harper instinctively step back. "As my father stated, that land legally belongs to Ava and me," Owen said, his voice low but steady. He spoke without anger, without drama, only facts. "And everything Ava has just said represents my own intentions as well." He paused, then met the eyes of each member of my family, one by one, his gaze sharp and unyielding. "What you have done to Ava over the years is not only morally unacceptable, but could also be considered coercion, intimidation, and in some cases, fraud under the law. I suggest you take that into serious consideration." Then came his final words, calm, deliberate, and absolute. "This is a warning, and it will be the last. Do not ever again come to us with your selfish demands." There was no room for argument, no escape in his tone. My father, my mother, and Harper could no longer say a word. They simply stood there, stunned and powerless. Owen then took my hand and guided me back to our seats. Standing before the microphone, he faced the guests with a serene smile and spoke in a steady, composed voice, as though nothing at all had happened just moments before. "Ladies and gentlemen, we sincerely apologize for the unpleasant scene you've just witnessed. We are deeply sorry. Now, although our schedule has changed a bit, we would like to continue this evening as a joyful celebration of our marriage. Musicians, please. Let's have some music." At Owen's cue, the band members, who had been frozen in silence, sprang back to life. The bright rhythm of jazz began to flow once again, slowly melting away the heavy air that had settled over the room. A few guests exhaled in relief, resuming quiet conversations to disguise the lingering awkwardness. I turned toward Owen and the Carters, who were smiling gently at us. Their eyes were filled with absolute trust and a warmth that wrapped around me like sunlight. And then I understood. My real family was here. Not bound by blood or obligation, but by law, by reason, and most of all, by deep mutual respect. I was no longer the powerless daughter who had spent years being exploited. From this moment on, my new life was truly beginning. It was only later that I realized my father, mother, and Harper had already disappeared from the venue. I had no idea how or when they slipped out, and I didn't care to know. They no longer belonged in my story. Weeks passed. When Owen and I returned from our honeymoon, Los Angeles welcomed us back to ordinary life and to an unexpected storm of attention. One of the guests had filmed the entire wedding confrontation and uploaded it to social media. The video spread like wildfire. The comment section overflowed with outrage toward my former family. Before long, the footage was featured on national gossip programs. My father's face, his name, and the name of his company were broadcast across the country. Clients and long-standing partners began terminating their contracts one after another, and the social reputation my father had spent decades building collapsed in just a few days. My mother's and Harper's lives changed as well. Their days of luxury, funded by the company's credit cards, were over. The friends who once surrounded them vanished, leaving them isolated from their social circles. They soon found themselves in financial hardship, stripped of the glamour they had always flaunted. Harper, who once lived freely, now juggled multiple part-time jobs. I heard that my mother was looking for work as well. I learned of their situation secondhand, through acquaintances or in small mentions buried in online news. And yet, strangely, I felt nothing. No joy, no satisfaction, not even guilt. Only a cold, clear understanding remained. They had simply reaped what they had sown. Now, in the home we built atop the hillside, sunlight always filters gently through the windows. The air is filled with the scent of Owen's coffee and the herbs I grow in the kitchen. On weekends, his parents visit, and laughter rings across the garden bench that has become our family's favorite spot. The future we fought to protect that day has become a living canvas, one that now paints a portrait of love, respect, and a family we chose for ourselves.